So this is what we call raised beadwork. And my community of Kanienkahaka is very famous for this. It's been around since the late 1800s. We still do it, still very much a common art form in my community. What it's done on is, I mean, this is the first time I've seen it on a hat. But what we sell in the community is little, they're called fancies, I guess is what you could call them. They're little purses with all this beadwork on there that you hang up on the wall. There's also little pillows. There's picture frames. There's little boots, like a woman's high-heeled boot. And there's also birds that are in like a three-dimensional form. So the wings are done in this style. And you hang them up. And there's little legs that dangle below.
And the patterns, they're sort of flowers, flora from the region?
Yes, they are, yeah. And it's meant to make it look alive. That's why you have that 3D pattern, the raised pattern. So what essentially you do is it's an overlapping form. And what it does is, because you put a certain amount of beads, and it's not equal all the time, you kind of have to work with, because beads are not exactly the same size. So you have to add or reduce according to how high you want it to come up. And you go within a space, a certain, like let's say you're doing a leaf pattern, so you would have it would be like this. So you add beads and it pops up, but you have to keep them within a space so that they come upwards. It takes a lot of practice, but it's really beautiful once it's finished. And then also on here you have trimming, which is regular. You see that in any sewing store. This kind of, I guess they call it bias tape, where they put it on the inside of a cuff. But we used it because it's very colorful. You can buy it in almost any color. So it just accentuates the beadwork. And so you have this combination of a traditional art form and modern day materials, and you end up with something very wonderful. This is sold in the community, and you can find it all over the world. In fact, on eBay, there's some pieces that you'll find, and apparently there's many collectors who buy these things and trade them on eBay.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
I mean, this is obviously an example of a mixing of a European tradition and an indigenous tradition. Mm-hmm. There's a story you were talking about a clash of cultures at one time over a school. Mm-hmm.
That was in reference to the moccasins. Now, I mentioned earlier that the art form of center seam moccasins has almost been lost in my community. And I know this because in the middle, the 1970s, at that time, many of our children were sent off the reserve to go to school. And at this one particular high school in the town over, next to us, the children were not being taught in the language. They were being discriminated against, and it was very, very upsetting, and people were very mad. Their children weren't getting a good education. So they had tried to talk with, our band council had tried to talk with the school officials, but they wouldn't listen. So what they did was all the kids one day decided, from my community who went to the school, decided, hey, that's it, we're leaving. And they all got up out of their desks and they walked from the school back to our community, which is it would take about an hour. And they walked and they said, they came to our community and they said, we want our own school. So everyone was scrambling, and they decided to set up what's called the survival school. But at the first, in the very beginning, it took place in all different buildings throughout the community. People donated, living room here, a room there, and also the teachers were community members. And one of the things that they would teach was how to make moccasins. And also the process of making these sort of things, moccasins and doing any sort of work like this, there's a whole process that involves storytelling. So that's part of your learning, along with the patience, right? So as you sit there, you're learning, the kids were learning about the history and about the culture. And they were no longer having to learn about Canadian history. They were, in a sense, regaining back a sense of themselves as Kanienkahaka. This design across the brim is the way that we do our Tree of Peace, and I talked about that earlier, where you have the roots of the Tree of Peace going out, and the long leaves, it's the white pine. And these are symbolic of the white leaves, the long leaves on the white pine of the Tree of Peace. So a lot of this on here is local plants, but then again, you'll see little elements of the deeper spirituality and the deeper traditions of the Haudenosaunee. There is this connection of cultures. There is this connection of indigenous cultures that we did share. We did share. We adopted things from other people, and it's ongoing. When I walk through a museum, what I see are separations. This is woodlands, this is prairies, this is West Coast, this is East Coast. And within that, you have all the different nations within that. And so we're presented as these, or they attempt to present us as these neat, tidy little compact units, right? Compact groups that
Put a label on.
They put a label on us, and we're all separate. But in actuality, we're all very connected. And I think when you see something like this, or you see someone from my community wearing a pair of Sioux-style moccasins, it just speaks to that.